Hi everyone, I'm Lou Collins for CraftStash, and today I want to talk to you about the Distress Sprays. I've got 4 different sprays here. We're going to be going across all 4. That's the Mica Sprays, the Spritzes, the Oxide Sprays and the Spray Stains, and I'm going to be showing you lots of different creative ways for using each. Now there's a plethora of different colours available in each and every one of the sprays. I've chosen just a few to be able to show you how each one works. So Distress Spritzes are a pigment spray settled within a clear liquid. You've got beautiful shimmer, and these are ideal for adding a subtle hint of pearlescence to your projects. The Distress Mica Stains have more colour in them. The liquid has colour as well as the shimmery pigment. So you're going to get much bolder but still pearlescent looks from this spray. The Distress Oxide Sprays are a pigment and dye ink fusion. These are really special and they're going to give you beautiful chalky looks with wonderful opaque colour. And the Distress Spray Stains are different to all 3 of these. They are purely a dye-based ink, and these have a beautiful saturated colour, but without the pigment they don't show up on your darker cardstocks. Before we get started spraying, there's a few tools and essentials that you might need to grab. One of those is going to be something like a cardboard box with some kitchen towel in the bottom just to protect your work surface. It's ideal if you've also got some watercolour cardstock to spritz onto, but any cardstock will be great for testing out the colours. Something like some stencils are great if you want to start creating patterns within your sprays, and you're also going to want something to clean up, so something like some wet wipes is ideal. And if I'm not working on larger projects, just smaller ones, something like a glass mat is perfect for also protecting my work surface. So let's start by comparing all 4 sprays in a simple light and heavy spray. Beginning with the Spritzes. So these are a highly pigmented mica, and this is very pearlescent, all settled within a clear liquid. Now the clear liquid is really important because this means that you can get really subtle results with this. So I'm just going to spritz a light covering of the orange one here. This is Spice Marmalade, and as you can see we've just got some speckles. Now if I was to press this and make this much heavier, we can add full coverage of colour if we wish. In a moment I will hold this up for you and I'll show you how it looks close up, but let's do it again with the second colour. So just a light application. Because we're looking at a clear liquid as the base, we are not getting full coverage unless we really saturate that with a lot of the spray. Now with the spray, I feel that the shimmer really shows up best once it's dry, so I'm going to heat set this. So as you can see here, the shimmer shows through absolutely beautifully when held up to the light, but you don't have full coverage. This means that the base colour of cardstock that you're using really heavily dictates the end result. As you can see here, I have swatched all of the 12 colours of Distress Spritz so far that are available, and I've done this on black cardstock, on craft cardstock, on ink blended cardstock and on white for very different looks, and I definitely suggest that you do this as you start building up your collection. Sticking with the shimmery sprays, we're now going to be looking at the Mica Sprays. Now again with Mica you have pigment that settles in the bottom. You do need to shake this as you do with the Distress Spritz and the Oxide Sprays. Although because they're dyes you do not need to shake the spray stains. So ensure you mix up all of the pigment. You should have a metal ball in the bottom of the bottle and hear that rattling around to make sure everything's moving about. Now to me it seems that the mica inside the Mica Stain and the Distress Spritz is quite similar, but it's that base liquid that's different. So with the Mica Sprays we've also got a base liquid that is coloured. So as you can see, whether you do light or heavy application, you're still going to get a really deep and full coverage of your paper, and you really can't see the colour of the paper through at all. And I often feel that as these Mica Sprays are drying, they do lose how vivid the colours are just a little. Now looking at this one close up, you can again see that shimmer absolutely beautifully, but you've got that much deeper, darker colour and full coverage because the liquid that the pigment is floating in, and it's the pigment that we're seeing sitting on top of the paper, the liquid soaks into the paper, and that is also colorized with the mica sprays. I mean, look how vivid and bright those sprays are. Another thing to notice with these is that they overlay each other beautifully. The pigments will sit on top of each other and show their true colours. Now sticking with the oxide sprays, because these also have a pigment floating in a liquid. These are a little bit different because the pigment floats inside a dye-based liquid. So these are kind of like a hybrid of all the sprays. Now once again with the oxides, as we did with the mica sprays, we do have a coloured base. We can do a light application, we can do a heavy application. The difference isn't huge in the same way it was with the spritzes because, like I say, we have both the base liquid and the pigment showing through there with beautiful colour. Now the difference with oxides is that you get a chalky finish with these. You do get an amount of oxidization that happens as soon as you spray these onto your cardstock or paper by coming in contact with the air, but you can increase this and enhance this by spritzing your sprays with water to really help that chalky effect. That's the oxide part of the oxide sprays, and there's some really fun results that you can create doing this. So I'm going to give this a light mist of water as they were intended. And almost straight away we can see how much more chalky and almost frosted these colours become. Now let's dry these off and take a closer look. As we can see here, we do have that slight frosted effect on the colour. So it has muted the colours quite a lot, but we can also see how the colours have managed to overlay. That's because the pigment doesn't soak into the paper to mix, it sits on top. Now we have a little bit of blurring of the two colours because I spritzed it with water, but hopefully you could see the effect that the water actually had. And in fact up here, I don't believe I sprayed any water, so you can really see the difference with and without. I always find the oxides take a little bit longer to dry than other sprays, possibly because of the high pigment content in them, which, as I say, sits on top of the paper, doesn't soak in the way that just a dye ink will, and that way it does take longer to dry off. So the fourth spray is the spray stain. This is purely the dye-based one, so there's no mixing needing to be done with these. The colour is already floating around and saturated in the liquid. The spray stains is where you're going to get really beautiful vivid colours. Now you can spritz lightly and achieve a speckled look like so, or you can spritz much more heavily and get full coverage. Either way, the colour is always going to be beautifully vibrant. With Distress Sprays, if you depress the nozzle ever so lightly, you can usually get a speckled look. But if you're pressing down harder, you're going to get much heavier application. Now they will dry beautifully, and as we can see just in the centre here, the blue and yellow are starting to mix. This is going to help you achieve different colours such as the green that we're starting to see here. Before we look too closely at the spray stain here, as you can see, you've got quite a nice neat overall coverage without too much in the way of texture built in through the colours. Because the pigment's not floating in the liquid here as with the other three sprays, you get an even distribution of the colour. But you can add texture simply by adding some water. So I'm just going to spritz some water over the top of this one, and we can sit and watch the magic happen. It's almost going to dilute, or it look like it's bleaching the colour out of the paper, and this is one of the fantastic things about the Distress products. Now while that's just happening, and we can watch that happening as I'm talking, I want to talk to you about the colours available, because with the Distress Spritzes you at the moment only have 12 of the colours from the Distress line, and these 12 colours match with the oxides, with the inks and other products. With the spray stain that we're using here, you also get all of the colours from the Distress range, as you do with the Distress Oxides, but the difference is the Mica Sprays. These come in lots of different colours and you're going to find different names on the labels, although many of them will match and coordinate beautifully with the Distress line. Now that the water has done as much as it's going to do, I'm just going to place some kitchen towel over the top to lift off any excess, and we can really see the effect that the water has had on this. Now let's look at this a little bit closer. As you can see, we don't have shimmer in this. We do have a little bit of texture that's come from the watercolour cardstock, but not from the ink spray itself. Now this did dry quicker than any of the other sprays that have pigments in them, and you can really see how that water has reacted and lifted the colour afterwards. So as you can see, your choice of spray will highly depend on the coverage that you want to achieve, whether or not you want any shimmer, and how you want your ink to react with water, if at all. Now let's look at a few different techniques that you can be doing with your sprays. First, we can mix and layer our different sprays together. So for example, I've got here my Oxide spray swatch that we've done and it's all dried. I'm going to overlay this with some of the Spritz, which is purely the spray with the beautiful pigment inside and a clear base. So we should see our Oxide spray colour through and that gorgeous shimmer on top. I'm going to test this out by making sure that I'm using a different colour to either of the base sprays that I've got there in the Oxide, giving this a really good shake again to make sure that I'm really mixing up that pigment. And then I'm going to use both of my techniques of spritzing gently to achieve some speckles, and also spritzing quite heavily to achieve a fuller coverage. Now you can really see that beautiful orange pigment shimmering, but you can also see the blue coming through. So where I've sprayed this quite lightly, you can see that blue base colour with the orange on top, whereas where I sprayed it more heavy, it's kind of mixed with the Oxide underneath and given us an all over coral colour. You can do exactly the same with your spray stains and with your oxides. These are going to sit beautifully on top of your colour because of the pigment. Now bear in mind that you do still have a dye in here and that could soak into your paper and give you full coverage if you do apply it too heavily. But let's just spritz a light covering over the Distress spray stain that we've already done. So now this is dry, you can clearly see the Oxide spray is sitting on top of the colour absolutely beautifully. Where the speckles are, we have really built some gorgeous texture whilst not hiding the base colour from the spray stain at all. So we've added water to the sprays once they are on the paper, but what about adding water to your cardstock or paper before you spray for very different looks? So on this watercolour cardstock, I'm going to heavily spritz some water and just allow that to soak in for a moment or two. Now this is not only going to add more movement to your sprays, it's also going to lighten the sprays a little, almost water them down, but you still get beautiful effects. So let's start with the spritz. And then the mica spray, the Oxide spray, and some spray stain. Once again, I'm drying these off so that you can see the finished result. And with all of these, you can see we have a softer look. The two here, the Spritz and the Mica, that have shimmer in them, we do still have a small amount of shimmer. It's much less obvious with the Spritz, although I can still see it a little bit there. The Mica, which is definitely the heavier application usually, you can just see the smallest amount of shimmer in that. So it has diluted the shimmer down. With the Oxide spray, we've already now got some oxidization happening with that water on the base, and we've got beautiful texture throughout that when compared to the spray stain, which still has a nice even coverage, but we've got these beautiful almost sort of bleed lines where the water has faded out and blended really nicely into the paper. And you don't have to just aimlessly spray your cardstock or paper. You can use things like stencils to create beautiful effects. You can spray through a stencil with absolutely any of the sprays that we've been speaking about today for gorgeous results that are really quite stunning, and most of them will contrast really nicely. Once I've sprayed, I like to lay a piece of kitchen towel over the top of my stencil to lift off any excess, so that when I lift up my stencil, I'm not going to have any excess ink dripping onto my project. Now with sprays, you're never going to get a perfect result. This is because the liquid will seep ever so slightly underneath the stencil. But if you want subtle texture on a project, something like a spritzed background already and then layering over with even more spritz is a great way to achieve this. So I'm going to use exactly the same colour as I used for my base piece here, and I'm just going to lightly spritz through the stencil and reveal the much more subtle pattern that you can achieve. A couple of other things to consider with your sprays is not spraying them. So putting some of your sprays onto something resistant like a glass mat, simply pressing your stamp into the ink and transferring that onto your paper. Or you could even spray one of the spritzes or sprays mixed with a little water to create your own watercolour for painting. However you choose to use your spritzes and sprays, be sure to wash out the nozzles afterwards with clean warm water and allow to air dry. And don't forget, of course, to also wipe down all your surfaces, particularly the dye part of any of the sprays will stain over time. As for your hands, if you choose not to wear gloves, some warm soapy water will get the most of the residue off. Hopefully that's answered lots of your questions about the different distress sprays and stains that are on the market and how to use them. Don't forget, of course, to start layering them up and using them with and without water for completely different looks every time, and just have lots of fun experimenting. If you enjoy videos like this, don't forget, of course, to subscribe to the CraftStash YouTube channel, and we think you're also going to like this particular video coming up next just here. Take care, everybody, and see you soon.